Hello everyone. On this channel, I feel that information about what is happening in China is often not correctly conveyed to countries other than China, so I will be disseminating the information I have gathered in English. I'm getting information from multiple media, so I'd be happy if you could comment on the content of the video. Also, my native language is not English, so I use an AI speaker to create the voice to convey the information correctly. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and support us. This time, I will talk about the completely different common sense in Japan and China. Recently, China amended its espionage law and changed its contents. This makes us think about the future situation in China. People talk about China as if it were a law-abiding country, but in fact it is a dictatorship disguised as a law-abiding country because the Communist Party makes and changes the laws. Rather, it is important what specific actions are taken before the law is involved. Recently, China has expanded its definition of espionage from state secrets and information to include providing documents, data, materials, and goods related to national security and interests. However, it was not clarified what the Spying Act specifically refers to, and he was sentenced to imprisonment in a private trial while being detained. The definition of espionage has traditionally been problematic, and the Communist Party's change in definition has caused confusion. It can be said that the coverage of the Japanese mass media is out of focus. The most important point is to report what China is specifically doing, regardless of the Communist Party's laws. When I say that it is difficult because the law has changed, it is a story in a country where the law is strictly observed, and in China, the law is completely irrelevant. So we should clearly report that the CCP is ignoring the law. As a concrete example, I would like to move on to talk about banks in China. It goes back to the time before Hong Kong became what it is today, when the one country, two systems system was in place. Hong Kong law and Chinese law are different systems, and Hong Kong law had to be followed in Hong Kong. I've seen many cases where Chinese domestic laws are not being followed, so episodes about Chinese domestic laws are just strange. Hong Kong at that time was treated differently from mainland China, and was relatively solid. However, an incident occurred in which the general manager of a huge corporate group was detained at a hotel in Hong Kong by the Communist Party authorities and taken to the mainland. This is completely illegal. In Hong Kong, even if the other party is a criminal, it is a rule to obtain a court warrant and detain him based on the warrant. However, the Communist Party didn't care about that and took it away without permission. The Communist Party doesn't think the law has anything to do with it, and it's the kind of people who just grab people and take them away. This is how the law stands in China. As I mentioned earlier, the detained person was the head of a huge corporate group, and within that corporate group was a bank. This bank is a group company, and a group called Tomorrow Group, which advocates democracy, bought up the stock and made it a bank within their group. This bank had lent a lot of money to the group companies, but they didn't pay it back. Because the bank was controlled as a group, it was a situation where more and more money could flow to group companies. The Communist Party felt the problem with this situation, and major companies of the Tomorrow Group became the target of the Communist Party's investigation. Ultimately, the bank went bankrupt. After that, what happened to the bank's creditors, the depositors, is related to the current situation in China, so I will introduce it here. Chinese banks also have depositor protection schemes. According to China's deposit insurance regulations, which came into effect in 2015, it is supposed to insure up to 500,000 Chinese yuan. When converted to Japanese yen, up to approximately 10 million yen will be protected. However, when the bank I mentioned earlier went bankrupt, depositors who had deposits of more than 500,000 yuan were also guaranteed. At that time, it is said that all claims with a deposit amount of 50 million yuan or less were guaranteed. 50 million yuan is equivalent to 1 billion yen when converted to Japanese yen. In addition, an article reported that deposits of more than 50 million yuan were partially protected. Depositors include not only individuals but also companies. I think there are companies that have deposited a fairly large amount of money, but if they were able to protect up to about 1 billion yen in Japanese yen, it would have saved the entire amount. So, as I introduced earlier, the rule says that up to 500,000 yuan will be protected, but when the bank actually went bankrupt, the full amount was protected up to 100 times that amount. This is a very big message for Chinese depositors. This is because if a bank goes bankrupt, only part of the money will be refunded, and everyone will withdraw their deposits from the bank that looks dangerous and move the money to a bank that looks strong. However, if something were to happen, The government would come forward, and there was a trend that everyone would be protected beyond the existing rules. By the way, in America, we are doing the same thing. If we don't send out this kind of message, deposits will continue to flow out from weaker banks, and small and medium-sized banks will go bankrupt. However, this has side effects. Currently, small and medium-sized banks in China have many dangerous aspects. China is in a worse situation than America. Even at major banks, there are many cases where borrowers and lenders collude and lend out loans that they know will turn into non-performing loans in the future. After all, the future of the company is not important, and after retiring from the bank, I will work for the company with good treatment. They promise to pay a very large amount of money, take loans from banks, pay bribes, and withdraw money from banks. The person who pulled the money out of the bank is not going to pay it back. Local small and medium-sized banks are rampant. It is said that there are a lot of bad loans and quite a few banks that could go bankrupt at any time. However, such banks are collecting deposits, saying that the interest rate is higher if you deposit at our bank than at the major banks. Last year, such a bank suddenly stopped withdrawing deposits, which caused a big problem. Normally, local small and medium-sized banks are dangerous, so you think about moving your money elsewhere. But remember the bank processing I mentioned earlier. If the bank went bankrupt, the government stepped in and guaranteed everything. The idea has spread that if the government protects money that exceeds the rules, it would be better to deposit it where the interest rate is high. Originally, this bank is dangerous, so it is safer to transfer the deposit to another bank. But last year, I had a problem because I couldn't withdraw my deposit. At that time, it is not possible to withdraw money freely from the bank. There was an interesting content in an article, so I'd like to introduce it. According to an article on June 22 of this year, there are people who have not been able to withdraw their money even after 430 days have passed. It seems that 3 people were temporarily detained after demonstrating. About a month before that, the same thing happened with a bank in Henan province. More than 100 depositors of the memorization prize also protested against the bank, where the police were dispatched and tear-gassed away, and some were even injured. Especially at local small banks or financial institutions, there was quite a fuss about not getting the money back, but there are still people who haven't got it back. If you have a normal nerve, hearing this story should make people who keep their money in small financial institutions move their money to another bank, but that movement is not being done much. It is something that Japanese people do not understand in the general sense. Perhaps many people think that in China it is not so uncommon for banks to refuse refunds. As I have shown in past videos, there is currently no decent demand for funds in China. There is no movement to borrow money from banks and invest in something. We are not in the mood to invest in new facilities and expand production. Rather, it is difficult for banks to earn interest income in a situation where they have to restructure and reduce the scale of their operations. In spite of such a situation, deposits are being collected at high interest rates, so I think that the number of small banks that will fall into financial crisis will increase steadily in the future. At that time, I think there is a good chance that everyone's deposits will be fully guaranteed, and that they will go bankrupt somewhere and the limit will be up to 500,000 yuan according to the rule. If that happens, even slightly suspicious banks will start to withdraw their deposits. If you protect all your deposits while the economy as a whole is shrinking, a bigger problem will come to the fore when the economy gets even worse. In the case of China, there are many small and medium-sized financial institutions that are sloppily managed, so I think that a bigger problem will eventually arise. This is a threat not only to China, but to the United States as well. Banks in the United States have also gone bankrupt, but the policy of protecting deposits has temporarily suppressed financial instability. It goes without saying that China is dangerous, and I think that the United States cannot be so optimistic. That's all for now. See you next time.